Okay, we're going to get kicked off here. So welcome to ADHD Awareness. This is the first in our Webineve series. The purpose of Webineve is really just to get thinking and conversations out in the open and bring people some awareness to professional topics, I suppose. So we are inviting other speakers to come on and run some of these sessions as well. We are putting all of the materials into our learning platform, Neve Learning. So this is a way for us to give the platform some exposure. So you will see within the LinkedIn comments there, and if you registered before today, you will have received an email last night with join details to join the course within Neve Learning as well. Now, Neve will have some additional information beyond what you have within the live session. So if you follow your enroll link and you sign up, you'll join as a learner and you'll have your courses. So you've joined your active course. This is this one. You can go in and you can see the course description, the learning objectives. So what we're going to go through today is identifying key strengths with ADHD, explore the neurological underpinnings of ADHD traits and the relationship to cognitive strengths and challenges, and assessing the aspects of ADHD and their influence on creativity and problem solving. Within here, you've got modules. So the first module is the one that we're doing now. So if you are in Neve, you can hit join now and it will take you straight to the LinkedIn live session. So all kind of synced up, and it's the first time we've done this and so far so good, but please do let us know if anything hasn't worked because we don't know ourselves. So this is your first module here, but then after the session, you can go back and there is additional self-paced materials that you can start to go through. One of the key things with Neve is that it is designed for to be as inclusive as possible. It's designed for hybrid learning, and it's designed to give things in multiple formats and multiple ways and to be as inclusive as possible. So all of the tasks you have as an audio or as written, also imagery, and you can mark as complete and then move on to the next one. So you get your transcripts, and then there's additional resources put in here as well. So all of these materials are here for you to go back to. We will also add the video from today's session to the platform, so you can come back to this as many times as you want. And go through here and just kind of work through the activities as we've laid them out. So that's Neve Learning. You're also welcome, as I run through the slides today, you can also view the session. I think if I go here, you can follow the slides with me. So as I go through the first slide, you'll also get these notes. So this gives you something to anchor yourself back to about the kind of the key things that we're talking about on that slide. So you have your ADHD iceberg here, which I will present in a moment, and you've got all of the kind of key points. So it allows you to kind of come back to if your brain wanders, and also to have those key points to assist in any note taking or anything else that you're doing. So if you kind of just follow along with that, if you want, alongside my speaking, again, it's given multiple formats to learning and hopefully assisting with neurodivergent learning, which I myself am one of. So that is Neve Learning and how that works today, and you have free access to that course from today onwards, so able to share that and everything else. So with that, I will bring you back to our actual webinar today. So what is ADHD and what does it really mean? And first of all, who am I? So I'm Angela Prentner-Smith. I'm the founder and managing director of Neve Learning, and also This Is Milk. This Is Milk is a consultancy that focuses on inclusion, innovation, and skills. And we spun out Neve Learning, which is that hybrid, neurodiverse first, inclusive, and accessible learning platform. It works for things like webinars, it works for accelerators, boot camps, any live training you're delivering, or any self-paced. And ADHD, why did this become important to me? Well, firstly, it was part of my role as a mum and as a parent. And during COVID, I was going through the process of trying to get an identification for my son as ADHD. During that time as well, we were in the process of going through the CivTech Accelerator and developing Neve Learning. And what we landed on is that everybody was telling us things like, I'm dyslexic, therefore this never worked for me. When I'm talking about learning, I forged my own path anyway. And the commonality in people's experiences was that it was all different. And we learned different ways, we had different preferences, and most of us had forged our own path. And whether we were using neurodivergent conditions as the reason or the lead as to why we did that, or whether we had just done our own thing, the commonality was the difference, which landed on the whole concept of neurodiversity. Now, neurodiversity itself is an umbrella term for a movement that basically says conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia are just part and parcel of the whole umbrella of human experience and human brains. So a bit like biodiversity, where we have all of these wonderful flora and fauna that make up our plants and our animals, humanity is the same. We all have these beautiful brains that all operate in different ways, rather than the medical model, which took a view of autism, ADHD, dyslexia as very deficient based. So we were identified based on what we couldn't do, rather than just being a different part of that tapestry of humanity. Now, ADHD within that is one of the specific labels or specific conditions that has come out of the medical model. Okay, so it is a specific condition within the DSM. The DSM is the manual for psychological conditions. I think we're on DSM 3 or something like that. It doesn't really matter. ADHD is interestingly one of the most researched conditions in the DSM. So anybody who says it isn't a real condition goes against a lot of science. And where science has landed is that ADHD brains are literally wired differently. Now, how ADHD was termed and labeled was from a perspective of attention deficit hyperactive disorder, because these were the lead traits that people used or people recognized within classrooms, which was usually where this was identified, and it was usually identified in young boys. So these were your unruly children in classrooms were given this attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And it was your trouble focusing, your fidgeting, your movement, sometimes quite poor behaviors in classrooms that were not expected within that classroom environment. That's really where that term came from. However, as our understanding has grown around ADHD, we actually understand that behind that very male, very child-based identification of trouble focusing and fidgeting, there's also all of this other stuff going on behind the scenes. And through our increased knowledge, and this is coming both from psychology, from classroom, from neuroscience, from community, because we're learning so much from each other, we now understand that ADHD doesn't look like one thing. And what it actually is more of like a variable attention. It's not that we have a deficit of attention, we actually are not as in control of that attention as somebody without ADHD might be. And that can lead to all of these problems behind it. For example, sleeping problems. There is evidence that ADHD, or people with ADHD, they literally have a different circadian rhythm than other people. We can struggle with things like poor impulse control because of the way that our prefrontal cortex relates to the rest of our brain. Executive dysfunction, rejection sensitive dysphoria, all of these things sit behind ADHD. And what tends to happen is that some people internalize and some people externalize. And where younger boys got picked up with ADHD is because they externalized those feelings. They externalized the things that were happening to them, and they were therefore disruptive to the teachers. And that's really where that kind of model of ADHD came from. But we now understand that a lot of this can be going on inside a person that we never see. And even in a child, for example, that does present in that stereotypical ADHD way, there's a lot of stuff going on behind that child's exterior presentation that may well be depression. It could be a lot of anxiety. So there's an awful lot to ADHD that we don't see and we don't know and we don't acknowledge within a person, rather than what we're just expecting. And if you just go with the NHS website, unfortunately, it's still quite out of date, and it is based on that kind of earlier understanding of what ADHD is and how it looks. But there's an awful lot behind this as well. Okay, so the role of VAST in attention and perception. So VAST stands for Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. Now this term was coined by Dr. Hallowell, who's written a number of books. He started with one, gosh, I think this was as far back as the 80s now. He's been studying ADHD for an awful long time. He himself has ADHD, and he's a psychiatrist and works with children and adults with ADHD. His first book was called Driven by Distraction. And one of his more recent ones, ADHD 2.0, is almost like a kind of revised version of that with all of the information that we have now. And his preferred term for ADHD is variable attention stimulus trait. So this is about our ability to control that attention rather than a deficit in it. And the reason that that's an important distinction is that people with ADHD can actually enter hyperfocus. So we can be so focused that we literally forget everything else around us. We can be focused for sustained periods of time on a task if it interests us. If it doesn't interest us, the effort involved of getting that task done, for example, my bookkeeping, is inordinate. It's actually painful. The thought of doing my bookkeeping is not just that's a task I need to do. It is a painful level of discomfort I have from doing that because I have no interest in it. And that's the other part of VAST, is that ADHD is more around interest-based stimulus rather than priority, which is why somebody with ADHD can literally spend 3 days without eating or sleeping, potentially, to finish an artwork, yet can't spend 5 minutes doing that bookkeeping. So it's very interest and purpose-based rather than priority-based. And there's problems with dopamine and other stuff in there, but we'll get onto that in a moment. But variable attention stimulus trait came from ADHD 2.0, I believe, from Dr. Hallowell, and that is his preferred term. He also talks about the fact that because of social media, because of our mobile phones, a lot of people are almost getting like a kind of fake ADHD. Fake's the wrong word, but they are getting ADHD traits because our phones are literally wiring us for it. We are losing the ability to sustain attention. Now, people that have kind of acquired those VAST type traits still have a different makeup to people who have ADHD through their neurological makeup in the first place. That being said, the symptoms and the challenges that come with that can be just as difficult. There's some other interesting things with Dr. Hallowell's work as well, in that he talks about the fact that actually, as a species, we are becoming more neurodivergent. And that's not just through diagnosis, that's not just through awareness. We are literally being born more neurodivergent. So anything might make you think that the world needs more of us. So yes, that's VAST and Dr. Hallowell, and I would certainly recommend his book ADHD 2.0 for anybody who wants a more up to date. He also takes you through some very new treatments, new ways of thinking about our brain that wasn't known when he first wrote Driven by Distraction. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the challenges of ADHD in terms of both the words of it, what it means, and the diagnostic process that has been very male-led and dominated by classroom dynamics, and therefore has meant a lot of women, for example, were not picked up as ADHD. We are seeing a little bit of an ADHD renaissance and autism renaissance in women, because literally until not even that long ago, autism and ADHD were not considered female conditions at all. It was believed that we didn't have it. We now know that that's not the case. We just present generally differently. So yes, the world is changing for all of us, but for a good reason. Okay, now with ADHD, our brains are wired differently, okay? We literally have different wiring, and if you were to go in for a brain scan, with ADHD, your brain looks different than a neurotypical person's would. It's that interesting and it's that defined. As my son's psychologist said, it's the frontal cortex, your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, the connections between it and the back aren't as developed as in a neurotypical brain. So you literally have to wake up your prefrontal cortex and send the connections to the back of your brain in order to take on some of those executive functioning and other things that a neurotypical person may find easy. But that wiring also brings us some acknowledged strengths. So where we have people that could be considered impulsive with a lack of focus, having a busy brain, might answer out of turn because they just need to get the answer out and they don't have the self-control to hold it back. They may overwork, they may be fatigued, may be fidgety. On the flip side of that, we've also got really energetic, enthusiastic people that see linkages. These are generally big picture people. They can connect things from one system to another, where other people might not see those connections. Work brilliantly under pressure, and you often see people with ADHD in sales roles, business development, but also in the paramedics and the police. They really strive under pressure. Give them a boring job of just admin, not interested, can't do it, would be very distressed by that. Hence why the old classroom setup was so distressing for children with ADHD. It can also be very compassionate and empathetic people. They can be considered hypersensitive, and that's both a strength and a weakness. And I know from my son, I've really learned about him. He's 11 now. His vibes are always right. His sense of what's going on and the sense of the vibes is so accurate. He's never wrong. I won't tell him that, but he is never wrong with it. So he's picking up on literally everything about it. Where he struggles with now is actually deciding which of those vibes to do something about, which one of those matter. And he's so sensitive to all of them, that can be quite debilitating. An interest in the novel. These are people that are innovators. They want to see the new thing. They want to try the new thing, and they can be exceptionally hardworking and project oriented if they have a goal that interests them. You give these people a passion purpose, and they will just knock it out the park. These are some of the sides of ADHD that we need to harness. We need to give people the opportunities to display them, and not keep defining people by the negatives. Because if we keep defining people by the negatives, whether that be dyslexia, ADHD, autism, or whatever else, what that's doing to a person's self-esteem is it's impacting their worth. They don't believe that they can provide as much value to the world. And if you're a person who's very sensitive already, the constant criticism, the negativity, and everything else can be very debilitating. And then that on top of propensity for depression and other conditions such as anxiety disorder, etc., it's a little bit of a vicious circle. And you don't know what starts with the ADHD, what ends with the anxiety, what was to do with criticism. It all kind of gets wrapped up because we all only have one brain. And children with ADHD tend to experience something like 30 to 50 times more criticism than a neurotypical child. I don't like the word neurotypical, but in this context, I don't have a better one. And that criticism is because they don't tend to behave the way adults expect them to in the school environment and the home environment. And they can be very challenging. And we don't need to shy away from that. Some people with ADHD also have something called PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance, which is literally an F you, I won't do what you tell me, in the words of Rage Against the Machine. So having that, if like I go and tell my son, can you please pick your clothes up off the ground, that is enough to set off a whole full-blown argument. This pathological demand avoidance can be very, very severe. That's not every person with ADHD has that, but it is a trait that can be common and co-occurring within it. So there are challenges with this as well. But if you are a person who is already quite sensitive, receiving lots of criticism, that tends to bring you down, not to bring you up. The flip side of that is, for people with ADHD, they are equally affected by compliments and praise. So if you have a child or a colleague or even yourself, being kind and giving praise and compliments, it's like an amplifying effect. So if we can just remember that everything can be potentially amplified if it is criticism, but amplified if it is compliments, that might be an easier way for us to navigate these relationships, which can be challenging. They can be challenging for the person, and they can be challenging for the other person on the other side. Okay, so the paradox here, right, is I consider neurodivergent people like myself, we are paradoxes. I was actually doing my own access to work assessment yesterday, and the woman was asking me about the challenges that I had. And I was like, I can deal with massive systemic issues. I can deal with discrimination. I can manage 2 businesses. I cannot stay on top of my diary. I cannot stay on top of my emails. Things like setting my laptop up for work in the morning, I can't do. I have to get my husband to do it. Things like that are so difficult to me that I have to get outside help or I have to overcompensate for. So we are like these human paradoxes. There's also these things like ADHD. It means that you can't stick to a routine because you forget the routine, right? You don't give that routine any importance in your brain, so you forget it. And then every day it's like you have to go through the same thing of, what do I do today? Do I brush my teeth? Do I get in the shower? But yet you thrive in routine. You can get easily understimulated, you can get easily overstimulated, thrive under pressure, get burnt out easily, crave social interaction because you get a buzz out of it, but also socializing is difficult because you potentially get rejection sensitive dysphoria. I get easily excited by new things and I lose interest really quickly. So there's a lot of things here that are paradoxical for those of us that are living with ADHD, and that can be confusing for the people around you. So yeah, there's things like keeping up with medical needs, basic self-care, judging how much time something will take. There's a concept called time blindness. This is really prominent in most neurodivergent conditions. This notion of not being able to tell how long something will take, even if you've done it 10 times before. I'm particularly bad at that myself. I will leave myself no time to do massive big tasks, but then something that I think will take me forever and I just can't get done will take me 5 minutes. And it doesn't matter how many times I've done it, I still have that blindness. So yeah, odd little challenges, things like dealing with mail, stuff that's like boring, like hanging out your underwear. It's bitty, it's challenging. These are the kind of things that can exhaust you. And exhaustion is really common for people with most neurodivergent conditions as well, because we're putting so much effort into daily living that it exhausts you. And those sleep problems, your brain tends to race at night if you're neurodivergent. And you tend to work through everything that's happened through the day as you're trying to fall asleep. So then those sleep problems can then impact your next day, and then you get into these kind of cycles. So it's all related in our one big, messy, complex, beautiful brains. Okay, so something that is in our brains that is different if you have ADHD or ADHD type traits. Within your brain, there's 2 parts. There's a default mode network and there's a task positive network. Now there are notes on this in Neve, so if you join in, there'll be further information on this. Your default mode network is the part of your brain that's operating when you're dreaming, when you're doing creative tasks, when you're brainstorming, ideating, when you're connecting different thoughts. Is the creative part of your brain. It's not always logical. It's also the part of your brain that can fall into depression and anxiety. Your task positive network, this is the part of the brain that gets things done. It's the part of the brain that's like, I need to work out this calculation. I need to do my bookkeeping. I need to tick this off of my to-do list. Now, ADHD brains and everybody else's have both of these parts. When you have ADHD, the difficulty is switching between the two. It's like having a faulty toggle. If you don't have ADHD, you can go, I need to do this task now. I'm going to sit and do my bookkeeping. I have 2 hours to do it. Brilliant, done, no issue. You then can flip and go, I'm going to go take the dog for a walk. And you might ruminate and you might think about things and you might come up with new ideas and then come back to your desk and go, okay, next job on my list is managing my diary. I can do that. When you have ADHD, you can't flip like that. You can get stuck in the DMN. So you get stuck in this dream state where thoughts aren't necessarily connected, or you're making connections, or you're dreaming, or you're thinking, and you're being creative. And you can't boost yourself out of that to go into the task positive network. Equally, you can get stuck in the TPN, right? If you have one of those days where you're like, I am hyper focused, I am going to work through everything on my to-do list and I've got 8 hours to do it. You're in that TPN and you're flying. You can also get hyper focused in the DMN. You know, if you're working on an artwork and you're stuck for 3 days and you see so many things about like Jackson Pollock for days, ending up working on one painting and not sleeping, not eating, not looking after food and these things, can get stuck in these states. And that's basically, you've got a faulty connection between the DMN and the TPN. Your cerebellum is another part of this. So I've mentioned the prefrontal cortex that, sends connections to the back of the brain and is really responsible for things like executive functioning. What I mean by executive functioning is just looking after stuff. Like, I'm going to fill my backpack, I'm going to make my lunch. Executive functioning, looking after that stuff. Your cerebellum is a part of the brain that is more primitive. So you've got that kind of flight, freeze, fight mode within it. And it's a very primitive part of the brain. And you've got these two parts connecting each other. And when you have ADHD, that connection isn't as active. So what ADHD meds do is they actually wake up the frontal cortex and connect things between the front and the back of the brain. Okay, so with that, that's the end of today's presentation. There is more information within Neve Learning. I feel I've talked very quickly there, but there's an awful lot to get through, and it feels like a little bit of a damp squib at the end there. But I would love to carry on the conversation with you, and we would like some feedback, both on how this went today, on the platform, on how this worked, and also just if there are other things that you'd like to hear about, or indeed whether you'd like to host a WebInEve as well. My colleague Kezia will be posting a feedback link, but you can also get that through the Neve Learning platform if you run through those as well. So with that, I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you everyone for coming, and I will be monitoring comments in the LinkedIn Live as well after this as well.